A bright spotlight shone in the small, silent room. Detective Sarah Clark's hands shook as she stared at the file on the table. Her heart pounded like thunder. Across from her, a video screen played. The grainy footage showed her own face. She was wearing her badge, her uniform. She stood over a fallen man in a dark alley. In her hand glinted a knife. Her lips moved, but no sound came. Then the screen went black. Officer Mike Roberts burst in, his eyes wide with shock. "Sarah, you're under arrest," he whispered, lowering his voice so only she could hear. The handcuffs clicked. Sarah blinked, too stunned to speak. How could this be real? She was the detective, not the criminal. Her mind spun. Whose trick was this? Who had set her up? The room seemed to close in. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Sarah's world tilted. What would happen next? Sarah's breathing caught in her throat. Her uniform felt heavy on her shoulders. She wanted to shout, to tell Mike he was wrong. But her mouth was dry. Her eyes darted to the door. Was someone hiding behind it, watching? She could almost feel cold eyes on her back. The tape, the proof, lay on the table. What if it was real? No, it had to be fake. Someone must have created it to frame her. But who? And why? A chill ran down her spine. She forced herself to stand. "Let me see that tape," she managed, voice shaking. Mike hesitated, then pushed a memory stick across the table. Sarah's hands trembled as she reached for it. She gripped it tightly, nails digging into the plastic. What did it contain? She took a deep breath. "Play it," she whispered. Mike hit a button. Sarah stared at the screen, bracing herself. The truth would come out. Or would it? The bright lights of the interrogation room faded. Sarah closed her eyes and took a steadying breath. In the blink of an eye, she was back in her office at Central City Police Department. It was only 2 nights ago. The city lights had sparkled through her window. She had felt sure of herself, proud to solve cases. Back then, she had been hunting a clever thief who stole valuable art pieces. No one knew who he was. People called the thief the Shadow. He left no clues. Sarah was determined to catch him. She had studied his moves, talked to witnesses, and looked at security footage for hours. She had nearly cracked the case. She remembered the thrill of the chase. She remembered how her heart had raced when she found a hidden painting behind a false wall. It was a small painting, but it was priceless. She had felt like a hero. Mike Roberts had been her partner for 3 years. He was tall and always wore a calm smile. He believed in Sarah. He followed her lead and kept her safe when she went undercover. Tonight, they would meet at the warehouse on Pine Street. That was where she had traced the Shadow's latest clue. She had found a scrap of fabric caught on a nail by a broken window. She asked Mike to come with her to check the place. The warehouse was old and dusty, with broken wooden floors and windows boarded up with heavy planks. The air smelled musty. Inside, crates and barrels were stacked in dark corners. Sarah turned on her flashlight. The beam cut through the gloom. She moved quietly, careful not to trip on an old rope lying on the floor. Mike stayed close behind. They found strange footprints in the dust, like someone had skated across the floor. Sarah's eyes widened. "That's not just a boot print," she said softly. "It looks like the sole of a fancy shoe." She knelt down, brushing dust away. Mike knelt too. They saw a tiny button caught in the print. Sarah picked it up with tweezers. The button was silver, with an ornate design. She tucked it into a small evidence bag. "This could be his mark," she said. Mike nodded. "Let's keep moving," he said. They pressed deeper into the warehouse. Then something creaked above them. Sarah froze. She pointed her flashlight up. The ceiling boards shifted, and a shadow moved across them. Sarah's heart jumped. She crouched low. "He's here," she whispered. Mike raised his gun. They both moved toward the door at the end of the hallway. Outside, police cruisers waited with lights flashing. Sarah had called for backup. She felt brave. She felt ready. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed behind them. They whirled around. A beam had fallen across a stack of crates. The crates toppled, one by one. Dust flew into the air. Sarah ducked. Mike shouted, "Get down!" They both dropped to the floor just as a heavy barrel rolled over where their heads had been a moment before. The sound of cracking would fill the air. Sarah felt her pulse hammer in her ears. She crawled out from under a fallen plank. Mike helped her up. They were safe, for now. But something was wrong. Sarah looked back at the fallen crates and barrel. The footprints led away from them, out through a small door to a side alley. She grabbed her radio. Team A, move in through the side entrance. Cover me. Her voice sounded firm, strong. A team of 4 uniformed officers arrived. They fanned out, guns drawn. Sarah led them through the side door. The alley was narrow, lit by a single street lamp. Trash cans lined the brick walls. Sarah shone her flashlight on the ground. More footprints. They led around a corner, to a fire escape ladder. Sarah motioned for the officers to follow. She climbed up first, then Mike, then the others. At the top, they found a metal hatch. Sarah looked at Mike. He nodded. Sarah pressed her ear to the hatch. She heard soft breathing. She raised her gun. Police! Open the door. The hatch rattled, then swung inward. Sarah stepped back. Mike shone his light into the dark room beyond. Inside, piles of stolen artwork leaned against the walls. Sarah's breath caught. She had found the hideout. But no thief. No shadow. The room was empty. She shone her light on a desk in the corner. On it lay several paintings, a laptop, and a set of keys. Sarah approached. She picked up the keys. The laptop was open. A video file was on the screen, paused at a moment that made her blood run cold. The paused image was her face. She gasped. Mike rushed over. They looked at the screen together. The file name read, Detective Clark's Crime. Sarah stared. This can't be right, she whispered. Mike checked the footage. It was a recording from a hidden camera inside the warehouse. It showed Sarah entering the building, the beam falling, the footprints. Then it showed her drawing a knife from her belt. Sarah's hand shook. On the desk next to the laptop lay her police ID. It was bent and scratched. Someone set me up, she said, voice tight with fear. Mike put a hand on her shoulder. We'll sort it out. But first, we need to catch the real thief. Sarah nodded, though doubt gnawed at her. She felt the weight of the badge on her chest. She was supposed to stand for justice, truth, and safety. Yet now her own truth was in question. She took a deep breath and closed the laptop. We bag this as evidence, everything, she said. Mike and the officers moved quickly, photographing the room, packing the paintings, gathering the laptop. Sarah picked up the keys again. They were heavy in her hand. Cold metal. They looked ordinary. Yet they fit only one lock in the city. The front door of Central City Museum. That was the place the shadow hit most often. Sarah's mind spun. Those keys could open any exhibit. The thought made her stomach churn. What if the shadow had a partner? Or was the shadow someone she knew? Someone inside the force? Sarah swallowed hard. Her legs felt weak. She steadied herself on the desk. The team finished collecting evidence. Sarah looked at the camera Mike held. It was small, hidden behind a shelf. Hard to see. Who put this here? She wondered aloud. No one answered. The officers were busy. Sarah turned the camera over in her hand. It had no labels. No marks. She pried it open with a screwdriver from her belt. Inside, small wires and a memory card lay coiled like a spider's web. Sarah lifted the card. On one side was a single word. Proof. She blinked. Proof of what? She slid the card into her pocket. Step by step, she would follow every clue. This was her case, and she would clear her name. She would catch the shadow and whoever lied about her. She would prove she was not the suspect. As they climbed down the fire escape, Sarah felt a sudden gust of wind. The old metal ladder creaked. She paused halfway. Below, Mike reached up a hand. Suddenly, a bright flash lit the sky like lightning. A sharp, thunderous boom shook the building. Bricks rattled. Sarah cried out. She lost her footing. Her hand slipped from the ladder. With a gasp, she fell backward. The ladder twisted, and she tumbled down the last few rungs. Mike lunged forward, catching her arm. He held tight. Sarah's heart raced. She looked up at the sky, which glowed bright red with flames. Smoke curled above the warehouse. Something inside must have exploded. The fire spread, licking at the old wood. Sarah's breath came in short, harsh gasps. She stared at the blaze, mind spinning. Who had set off the bomb? And why? She turned to Mike, eyes wide. We have to get inside, she panted. But the ladder bent, and they both fell to the ground in a cloud of dust and sparks. Sarah lay flat on her back, staring up at the sky, her heart pounding like a drum. The world was on fire. And so was her case. What would happen next? Sarah's ears rang as she lay on the dusty ground, the sharp smell of smoke filling her nose. Flames licked at the broken windows of the warehouse, and sparks danced in the dark night sky. Mike knelt beside her, his face streaked with soot. "Sarah, are you okay?" he asked, voice tight with worry. Sarah forced herself to sit up, her muscles aching from the fall. She rubbed her head, feeling a bump already forming. "I think so," she said, her voice trembling. She looked around. The fire had spread to the crates of stolen paintings. Bright orange flames swallowed one canvas, turning rich colors to ash. Sarah's heart pounded. Those paintings were evidence, and they were disappearing in smoke. Mike reached for Sarah's hand. "We need to move back," he said, pulling her to her feet. Sarah nodded, pushing her fear down. She followed him through the haze. Behind them, a team of officers shouted orders, battling the blaze with hoses. The water hissed as it hit the fire, turning steam into a white fog. Sarah's boots slipped on wet ground. Mike steadied her. Together, they moved toward the alley. At the end of the ladder, a police sergeant waved them in. Sarah stumbled forward and collapsed into his arms. The sergeant struggled to hold her up, then guided them both to safety. Outside, the street was full of flashing lights, red and blue from the fire trucks and police cars. Neighbors had gathered across the street. Some held phones up, recording. Others watched in silent awe. Sarah squinted against the glare. She spotted Dr. Eva Jones, the department's forensic specialist, pushing through the crowd. Dr. Jones knelt beside Sarah and checked her for injuries. "You're shaky, but you're safe," she said. "We'll get you to the hospital for a full check." Sarah nodded, grateful for Dr. Jones's calm voice. Mike helped Sarah stand. She leaned on him as they moved toward the waiting ambulance. As the paramedics loaded Sarah inside, Mike brushed away a lock of her hair. "You got hurt?" he whispered. Sarah smiled weakly. "Just a scratch," she said. But her arm throbbed where a piece of falling metal had bruised her. Mike climbed in after her and sat in the seat across. Sarah looked at his concerned face. "I'm sorry," she said. "I should have checked the structure before we went up." Mike shook his head. "Never your fault," he said firmly. "We'll figure this out together." Sarah inhaled slowly, letting his words steady her. The doors of the ambulance closed, and it jolted to life, weaving through traffic toward Central City Hospital. At the hospital, Sarah lay on a narrow bed in the emergency room. A nurse wrapped a bandage around her arm and checked her vitals. Sarah stared at the white ceiling, blinking through the bright lights. Mike waited beside her, holding a paper cup of water. "You need to drink this," he said. Sarah took the cup and sipped. The water was cold and soothing. She swallowed slowly, then set the cup aside. "Mike," she said, voice soft, "do you really think I'm framed?" Mike looked down at his shoes before meeting her eyes. "I know you," he said quietly. "You wouldn't hurt anyone. Someone is tricking us." Sarah nodded, but doubt twisted in her chest. She thought of the video footage, the planted camera, the twisted file name. Everything pointed to her being guilty. Yet Mike believed in her. That gave her hope. The doctor came in and smiled. "You're going to be fine," she said, glancing at Sarah's chart. "Just a mild concussion and a few bruises." The doctor patted Sarah's shoulder and left. Mike exhaled a relieved breath. Sarah sat up slowly. "What about the evidence?" she asked. Mike's face darkened. "The fire destroyed most of it," he said. "Only a few paintings survived, and the laptop was burned." Sarah felt her stomach drop. The clues she had gathered, the button, the footprints, the hidden camera, were gone. Someone had wiped the scene clean. Why destroy evidence if they wanted to frame her? Unless they wanted to hide something even bigger. Sarah pressed her fingers into the blanket, summoning courage. Then we need new leads, she said. We go through everything we have left, even small details. Mike nodded. I'll start with the footage from nearby cameras, he said. Maybe someone caught the bomber. Sarah managed a small smile. Good idea. I'll talk to Dr. Jones about analyzing the memory card I pocketed. Mike's eyes widened. You still have it? Sarah reached into her coat and pulled out the tiny card, dusty but intact. I didn't trust leaving it behind, she said. Mike's grim smile faded. This could be our best shot. By afternoon, Sarah was discharged. She walked slowly out of the hospital, leaning on Mike's arm. The sun was low in the sky, turning the city in shades of gold and pink. Sarah blinked against the light. The streets felt strangely calm after the chaos of the night. They reached Mike's car and climbed in. Sarah buckled her seatbelt and closed her eyes. Her body ached, but her mind buzzed with questions. Mike started the engine and drove toward the police station. As they drove, Sarah thought back to the night before, to the hidden camera, to the Shadow's stolen art, to her own badge being marked as a weapon. So many pieces didn't fit. At the station, the hallway was quiet. A few officers sat at their desks, typing. Sarah and Mike slipped into the evidence room. Dr. Jones was already there, hunched over a small microscope. The memory card lay on the table, next to a microscope slide and a laptop. Dr. Jones, Sarah called softly. The scientist looked up and smiled. Detective Clark, she said. I've been waiting. Sarah placed a hand on the table. What do you see? Dr. Jones adjusted the microscope. Tiny fingerprints, she said. All over this card. But they're smeared, like someone tried to wipe them. Sarah's chest tightened. Can you clear them up? Dr. Jones nodded. I'll need time and special chemicals. But it's possible. Sarah exhaled. Do it. And the footage. I want every copy. Dr. Jones stood. I'll get to work. She left the room. Sarah and Mike stayed behind. Mike glanced at the card. It's our only lead, he said. Sarah nodded. We can't lose it. They stepped out into the hall. Mike headed to the security office, and Sarah walked to her desk. She dropped into her chair and opened her notebook. She flipped through pages of scribbles, the silver button with the fancy design, the odd shoe print, the location of each crime scene, and the Shadow's pattern of hitting art galleries during busy events. She paused on a line she had written. Shadow partners. Who else could have the skill and the access to frame me? She tapped her pen on the desk. Someone on the force? Someone at the museum? Someone who knew her schedule? She thought of Chief Lawson, her boss. He had seemed supportive, but had he been hiding something? Sarah shook her head. She couldn't doubt everyone. But she had to keep her mind open. Mike returned with a stack of DVDs. Camera footage, he said. He handed them to Sarah. From the streets around the warehouse, the museum, and the park. Sarah took them. Good work, she said. She looked at Mike, determination in her eyes. Tomorrow, we review them frame by frame. Mike nodded. Let's see who was lurking that night. Sarah closed her desk drawer and pushed it shut. She looked at her reflection in the dark screen of her computer monitor. Her eyes were tired but bright with resolve. She reached up and touched her badge, worn but shining. She would get her name back. She would catch the Shadow and the traitor who set her up. Late that night, Sarah sat alone in her small apartment, the city lights twinkling through her window. She poured a cup of tea and held it in both hands, letting the warmth seep into her fingers. The tea tasted bitter, but it soothed her nerves. On the coffee table lay the silver button in its evidence bag, the stack of DVDs, and a small folder with witness statements. Sarah picked up the button and turned it over. The ornate design looked like a swirl of leaves. She pressed on the edge, and it popped open, like a tiny box. Inside was a minuscule piece of paper, folded tight. Sarah's breath caught. How did I miss this? She whispered. She unfolded the paper carefully. Written in neat handwriting were 4 letters, ELLA. Sarah's eyes widened. Ella, that was Ella Harper, the museum curator. Sarah remembered meeting her at a gallery event. Ella was friendly, helpful. Sarah had trusted her. Could Ella be involved? Sarah's mind raced. She let the letter slip back into the button and snapped it closed. Her tea grew cold beside her. A soft knock at the door made her jump. She set her cup down and walked across the room. She peeked through the peephole. No one was there. She frowned and opened the door a crack. A small envelope lay on the mat. No name. Sarah bent down and picked it up. The envelope was thick, heavy with paper. She took it inside and closed the door, locking it behind her. She crossed to the couch and sat, the envelope in her lap. She tore the top open. Inside was a single photograph. Sarah's heart froze. The photo showed her, in her uniform, standing in her office 2 nights ago, after the hidden camera had filmed her. She was looking through her files, hair tied back. But someone else stood behind her, a dark figure in a hoodie, face hidden in shadow. The hand of the figure rested on her shoulder. Sarah gasped. She flipped the photo over. On the back, in the same neat handwriting, were words, "I warned you." Sarah's blood ran cold. Who had taken this photo? Who had sent her this warning? Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She glanced at the screen. Unknown number. She held her breath and answered. A voice, low and distorted, whispered on the other end, "Stop digging, Detective Clark, or you'll be next." Then the line went dead. Sarah sat very still, the photo trembling in her hand. Her mind raced with fear and anger. Someone was watching her every move. Someone close enough to snap pictures inside her office. Someone who would kill to keep the truth buried. Sarah pressed her back against the couch, the photo pressed to her heart. Outside, the city lights blurred as tears filled her eyes. She slid to the floor, her back against the couch, and stared at the photograph. The word, "next," echoed in her mind. Next what? Next time they would not warn her? Sarah's heart pounded like a drum. She gripped the photo tightly. She would not be silent. But she did not know who to trust. Mike? Dr. Jones? Even Chief Lawson? The silence of her apartment felt heavy, like a lid closing on her chest. A sudden chill ran through her body. She looked toward the window. There, reflected in the glass, was a dark shape, a face pressed against the pane. Sarah's scream caught in her throat. The shape moved, then disappeared. Her breath caught. Her eyes darted to the door. She reached for her phone to call Mike, but the battery was dead. The lights flickered and went out, plunging her apartment into darkness. Sarah's heart pounded. She rose to her feet, every muscle tense. The photograph slipped from her fingers and fluttered to the floor. Then, through the silence, came a faint click, the sound of the door latch turning. Sarah froze when she heard the soft click of the latch turning. The fading light of the hallway lamp slipped under the door. Her heart pounded like a drum in her chest. She pressed her back against the wall, breathing hard. The door creaked as it opened just a crack. A sliver of shadow slipped into the room. Sarah's eyes widened. The figure moved slowly, arms outstretched. She could make out the outline of a hooded coat. Fear rattled through her. Every muscle in her body knotted tight. She knew she had to act fast, or the stranger would find her. The intruder stepped inside. The hallway light flickered and went out, leaving the room almost dark. Sarah's pulse raced. She reached behind the couch and found the heavy metal lamp she had used earlier in the warehouse. Her hand closed around its cool, hard base. She waited. The figure moved deeper into the apartment. Sarah held her breath. Her mind raced through memories of martial arts class she had taken years ago. She remembered the coach's words, "Stay calm. Use your strength at the right moment." Sarah gripped the lamp tight. When the figure reached halfway into the room, Sarah sprang up. She swung the lamp with all her weight. The base struck the intruder's shoulder with a loud crack. The figure stumbled, letting out a muffled grunt. Sarah slammed the lamp again. The intruder fell to the floor with a thud. Sarah peered into the dim light and saw a man's face, twisted in pain. He wore a dark hoodie that hid his eyes. He tried to push himself up, wincing. Sarah raised the lamp for a third strike. Then she hesitated. The man was down. She did not want to hurt him badly. She put the lamp down and backed away. The intruder groaned. He reached into his pocket and clutched something small. Sarah's stomach twisted. She could not be sure what it was. A weapon? A phone? She took a cautious step forward. "Who are you?" she asked, voice shaking. The man groaned again and spoke in a muffled voice. "Detective Clark, you're in danger." His words came slow and raspy. Sarah frowned. Why warn her now? Before she could move closer, he shook his head and spat blood. "Too late," he whispered. Then he pushed himself up and bolted toward the door. Sarah tried to follow, but her leg brushed the edge of the couch and sent her stumbling. By the time she found her footing, the man had slipped out into the dark hallway. The door slammed shut behind him. Sarah sank to the floor, her back against the couch. She pressed her hand to her cheek where the lamp had struck. It was tender and warm with blood. She exhaled slowly, trying to calm her racing heart. The man had warned her, but she did not know why. She did not even know his name. She pressed her fingers to her temples, feeling a dull ache. Then she noticed something on the floor. A small piece of torn fabric lay where the man had fallen. It was striped red and black. Sarah picked it up and held it against her badge. She had seen that pattern before, in the officer's uniform of someone she knew. Or was it a red scarf from the charity auction at the museum? Her mind swirled. She stood and moved to the front door. Her footsteps were quiet on the carpet, but her heart still pounded. She locked the door and slid the deadbolt home. Then she dropped to her knees and searched for her phone. The battery icon showed 0. Dead. She pressed the power button and the screen went dark. No calls. No texts. She sank back against the door. She needed Mike. She needed Dr. Jones. She needed someone she could trust. Her breath came faster. She closed her eyes and let the silence fill the room. Outside, the city buzzed with distant traffic. But in her apartment, only her own breathing and the faint hum of a broken lamp remained. The next morning, Sarah arrived at the station early. The sun was still low, painting the sky pink and orange. She pushed through the front doors and let out a shaky breath. The foyer was quiet. A single uniformed officer manned the desk. Sarah nodded and headed to her desk. She called for Mike on the radio. Moments later he rushed in, coffee in hand and worry in his eyes. "You okay?" he asked, setting the cup down. Sarah touched the bandage on her cheek. "I'm fine," she said, but her voice wavered. Mike frowned. "You didn't call last night." Sarah shook her head. "No battery. Someone tried to break in." Mike's eyes widened. "Did you see who it was?" Sarah showed him the torn fabric. "He warned me," she said. "But he ran off." Mike held the coffee cup out to Sarah. "Drink this. You need it." Sarah took a slow sip. The coffee was bitter, but it warmed her. She rubbed her eyes. "I need to follow up on Ella Harper," she said. The piece of paper said her name. Mike nodded. "I'll pull her security pass logs." He headed for the evidence room. Sarah sipped the coffee as she opened her notebook. She flipped to the page with ELLA written in big letters. She added a new line, "Check Harper's visit times. Check scarf colors." She glanced at the fabric. Red and black stripes. She circled it. Then she looked at the time. They had an hour before Chief Lawson's briefing on the case. Sarah walked to the bullpen. Most officers were at their desks, typing or on calls. Dr. Jones sat at a computer in the corner, adjusting a microscope slide. Sarah approached her. "Dr. Jones," she said softly. Dr. Jones looked up. "Detective," she said. "I've got something." She held up a thin sheet. "I cleaned the fingerprints from the memory card. There were 5 prints. 1 matches yours, as expected. But the others, 3 match fingerprints from the museum's curator office, Ella Harper. And 1 matches someone on our force, Lieutenant Harris." Sarah's breath caught. "Lieutenant Harris?" Color drained from her face. "Are you sure?" she asked. Dr. Jones nodded. "Positive. I ran them twice." Sarah pressed her palm to the table. "Thank you," she whispered. A chill ran down her spine. Her mind spun. Ella Harper and Lieutenant Harris. Both had access to the footage and to her office. Both had reason to frame her if they wanted to steal art. Mike returned, carrying 2 thick binders. "Pass logs and security camera times," he said. He dropped them on the desk. Sarah opened the first binder. It showed entry times for the museum's staff. Ella Harper's badge had been used in the curator's office on the night of the fire. And again, early this morning. The logs showed her entering the museum at midnight, when the building was closed. Sarah's brow furrowed. Why would Ella be there? She flipped the pages. The next page showed Lieutenant Harris's entries at the precinct. He had entered the detective's wing at the same time someone had taken photos in Sarah's office. Sarah looked at Mike. They both had the chance, she said. But who had the skill to plant cameras and burn evidence? Mike tapped his pen. Harris is trained in surveillance tech. He set up the camera. And Ella set the fire to destroy the paintings. Sarah clenched her jaw. We need to bring them in. She closed the binders and stood. Let's go. They moved quickly down the hall and into Chief Lawson's office. The door was ajar. Inside, the chief sat at his desk, reading a file. He looked up as Sarah and Mike entered. Detective Sergeant, he said. His face was calm. What's the update? Sarah took a breath. Sir, we have evidence that Ella Harper and Lieutenant Harris conspired against me. We have fingerprints on the memory card, security logs, and their access times match the break-in. The chief's eyes narrowed. He leaned back. This is serious, he said. He folded his hands. I'll authorize an immediate arrest. Relief and dread washed through Sarah. She had her name back, maybe. But she still felt the weight of danger. Thank you, sir, she said. Mike stood beside her. They left the chief's office and headed for the arrest team. Sarah's legs felt shaky, but she walked with purpose. She led Mike to the back exit of the station, where a group of officers waited. Ella Harper and Lieutenant Harris are to be taken in, she said. The officers nodded and loaded their gear. Sarah felt a surge of hope. She would clear her name. She would catch the real criminals. She took a deep breath and glanced at Mike. He gave her a small smile. They stepped outside into the bright morning sun. Sarah drove Mike's car to the museum first. The museum's marble steps gleamed in the light. A few tourists strolled by, taking pictures. Inside, the empty gallery felt quiet and cool. Sarah and Mike walked through the halls, their boots echoing on the marble floor. Sarah spotted Ella Harper at the end of a corridor, clutching a folder and talking on her phone. Ella turned and saw Sarah. Her face went pale. She ended the call and tucked the folder under her arm. Detective Clark, she said, voice trembling. Sarah held up her badge. Ella Harper, you're under arrest for arson, conspiracy, and destruction of evidence. Ella's eyes filled with tears. You don't understand, she began. Sarah shook her head. Save it for the station. Two officers stepped forward and took Ella's arms. She did not struggle. Next, they went to the precinct to arrest Lieutenant Harris. Sarah led them to the surveillance rooms. Through the glass, she saw Harris sitting at a bank of monitors. He looked up, surprised. When he saw Sarah's badge, he stood. Detective, he said, voice tight. Sarah stepped forward. Lieutenant Harris, you're under arrest for conspiracy, unauthorized surveillance, and framing an officer. Harris's face went white. He did not resist as officers cuffed him. Sarah felt a rush of relief and guilt all at once. She had arrested a fellow officer. But it had to be done. Back at the precinct, Sarah sat at her desk. The sun was high in the sky. The case files lay open before her, each page a proof of the truth. Mike stood by the window, looking out at the city. We did it, he said quietly. Sarah nodded, but her mind was elsewhere. She still felt the ache of betrayal. She thought of the man who broke into her apartment. He had warned her. But she did not know who sent him. She thought of the photo of the dark figure behind her. That person was still out there. Sarah glanced at her phone. It had no signal. She needed a break. She picked up the photo and stared at it. The shadowy figure's hand on her shoulder looked real. But she could not make out the face. As Sarah folded the photo and placed it in a case file, she heard a sudden, thunderous crash. The walls of the precinct shook. Papers flew from desks. A deep rumble rose from below. Sarah and Mike ran to the window. Outside, across the street, the side of the new forensic lab had exploded. Flames and smoke billowed into the sky. Glass shattered, spraying into the street. People screamed. A police cruiser flipped onto its side. Sarah's heart seized in her chest. Mike grabbed her arm. "What happened?" he shouted over the roar. Sarah pressed her hand to the glass, staring at the burning building. Her mind raced. Evidence, dark figure, warning, everything was connected. She clenched her jaw. "We have to go," she said, voice steel. She grabbed her badge and ran out of the precinct, her feet pounding on the steps. The lab fire blazed, lighting the sky orange. The city trembled. And Sarah knew the true enemy was still out there, watching every move. A sudden blast ripped through the air. The walls of the new lab shattered, sending glass and metal flying like rain. Sarah felt the heat on her face as flames burst from the building. Mike grabbed her arm and pulled her back onto the sidewalk. They both fell to their knees, ears ringing. Smoke filled their lungs and turned the sky orange. Sirens wailed closer now. Through the haze, Sarah saw a dark shape moving near the wreckage. The figure stepped out of the smoke, tall and calm. Sarah's heart froze. Was it a friend, or her enemy? She opened her mouth to shout, but no sound came. Then the figure lifted a hand. Before she could see its face, the world trembled again. What would happen next? The next morning, Sarah woke with a pounding head. Every breath felt heavy, as if she were breathing through wet cloth. She stared at the ceiling of her small apartment and remembered the blast. The fire. The shadowy figure. She sat up slowly and reached for her phone. It lay dead on the nightstand, screen dark. She sighed and swung her legs over the side of the bed. Her muscles felt stiff from the night before. She dressed in her uniform, each movement slow and careful. She grabbed her badge from the dresser and clipped it to her belt. The metal felt cold and real. She reminded herself, she was here to find the truth. She would not let fear win. At the precinct, the air was filled with tension. Officers whispered as Sarah stepped past rows of desks. Mike met her at the door of Chief Lawson's office. His face was grave. "You okay?" he asked quietly. Sarah forced a nod. "As well as I can be." Chief Lawson looked up when they entered. He was tall and stern, but his eyes showed worry. "Detective," he said, "the lab blast was no accident. We found evidence of a delayed fuse set inside." Sarah's breath caught. "A delayed fuse?" She shook her head. "Someone wanted to hurt us, and slow our work." The chief rubbed his chin. "You and Sergeant Roberts need to lead this probe. Find out who did it, and where they went." Sarah straightened. "Yes, sir." Outside the precinct, smoke still drifted from the lab across the street. Sarah and Mike walked toward the wreckage. Black beams leaned at odd angles. Chunks of concrete lay like broken toys on the ground. Fire trucks hissed as water hit smoldering piles. A group of lab techs stood behind a barrier, wearing masks and hard hats. One of them was Daniel, the lead technician who had worked on the evidence from the fire scene. His eyes were red from smoke. He waved Sarah closer. "Detective, thank goodness you're here." His voice trembled. "We've found something." Sarah knelt beside him. Nearby, a twisted strip of metal caught her eye. It had letters stamped into it. "I think it broke off the fuse holder," Daniel said. He shone his flashlight on the strip. The letters read, XOX9. Sarah frowned. "That matches the model from the first bomb." She stood, heart pounding. "We have the same maker." Sarah and Mike moved deeper into the debris field. The ground was littered with blackened glass and melted plastic. They kept their masks on. Sarah stepped around a hot patch and spotted a small box half buried in ash. She pried it out with gloved hands. It was a phone that had been used as a timer. The screen was cracked, but she could still see static numbers. "The timer died when the blast hit," Mike said. "But we might get data out of it." Sarah nodded. "Good. Take it to Dr. Jones for analysis." She tucked the phone into an evidence bag. Then she noticed scorch marks on a nearby wall. They formed a path to a side door that hung open on its hinges. "Let's see where this led," she said. Inside, the hallway was black and hot. Each step left dusty footprints. They followed the marks to a small office. In the office, chairs lay overturned and papers burned at the edges. A metal cabinet was twisted open. Its drawers spilled out charred folders. Sarah reached for one folder that still had words visible, Project Shadow. She flipped through it. The pages described a covert plan to collect stolen art and destroy evidence. Her blood ran cold. "Someone is using my old case name," she whispered. Mike bent over her shoulder. "This was a name you used in your notes." Sarah nodded. "It was my code word for the art thief investigation. Now it looks like someone stole it and turned it on me." She closed the folder and turned to Mike. "We need every copy of these files. And we need to know who had access." Mike checked his notepad. "I'll get logins and IDs." Sarah took a deep breath. "Let's go." They returned to the police station and headed straight to the cyber lab. Dr. Jones was there, wearing a lab coat still stained from yesterday. She greeted them with a tense smile. "Detective Sergeant, I've got data from the timer phone." She held a tablet showing a graph of timestamps. The phone was set to trigger at 3:15 a.m., but the delay was set 2 hours earlier. That means it was planted around 1:15 a.m. Sarah's eyes narrowed. "We know where we were at that time. Who was near the lab? Who checked in?" Dr. Jones tapped the tablet. "Only 3 people used the swipe card then: Ella Harper, Lieutenant Harris, though they're in custody, and one more, Daniel." Sarah felt a shock. The lead technician was on the list. She looked at Mike. His face matched hers. "Daniel? He's been helping us." Dr. Jones added, "He logged in with his badge for maintenance checks." Sarah's mind raced. She thought of Daniel's red eyes in the smoke. She thought of his relief when he saw her. But she could not assume guilt. "We have to talk to him again," she said. They drove back to the lab site in a police cruiser. The blast zone was calmer now, but still hot. Daniel stood near the barrier, arms folded. His hard hat was off, and sweat dampened his hair. Sarah and Mike approached. "Daniel," Sarah said, keeping her voice even. "We need to clear up some things." He nodded, face pale. "I will help." Sarah held up the charred folder. "Did you see this in the office?" Daniel's eyes flicked to the folder. He swallowed. I saw it yesterday. It was on a shelf when I came to check the ventilation." Mike stepped forward. "Your swipe was logged at 1:15 a.m. Did you open the office then?" Daniel looked at the dust and ash on the floor. "I opened the room to get files," he said. "I did not know they were going to do that." Sarah frowned. "Why were you getting files?" Daniel's voice shook. "I thought I was helping you. You asked for all notes on Project Shadow so you could compare them." Sarah exchanged a look with Mike. "We never asked for files on Project Shadow," she said. Daniel's face went pale. "Then someone told me to get them." He looked at the ground. "I don't know who." Sarah felt a cold knot in her stomach. "Show us who told you," she said. Daniel led them to a small trailer beside the lab. Inside was a makeshift office with a single desk. On the desk lay a laptop and a burn mark on the floor where something had melted. Daniel pointed at the laptop screen. "He used this," he said. Sarah opened the laptop and saw an open chat window. The last message read, "Get me the shadow files, or you're next." The message was from an account labeled, Watcher. Sarah frowned. "We need to trace this account." Mike took a photo of the screen. "Cyberlab can do that. Let's grab the laptop." Sarah looked at Daniel. "Did you ever meet the Watcher?" Daniel shook his head. "No. He always used text." Sarah pressed her lips together. "We will find them." She closed the laptop. "Let's go back to the station." Back at headquarters, Sarah paced the small conference room. Maps of the lab, the museum, and the precinct were spread out on the table. Markers and sticky notes covered each map. Mike sat in a chair, rubbing his temples. "We know the fuse maker. We know the Watcher account. We know Daniel was forced." Sarah tapped a map. "We still need the face of our enemy." She looked at the map of the city blocks around the lab. "What camera can see the lab entrance at 1:15 a.m.? Mike pointed to a dot. "The street pole camera on Cedar Road." Sarah nodded. "Let's get that footage." She grabbed her keys. "I'll drive." Mike stood and followed her. I'll bring the server hard drive. They drove through quiet streets to the Cedar Road corner. A small metal box on a pole held the camera. Sarah and Mike put on gloves and opened the box. Inside was a blinking SD card. Sarah removed it and slipped it into a case. This should have the video from last night. Mike locked the box again. Let's hope we see someone. Sarah started the car and drove back. Her mind was a whirlwind of questions. Who was the watcher? Who had the skill to set a bomb and hack the camera? Who wanted Project Shadow files? And how was all of it tied to her? At the station, they rushed to the cyber lab. Dr. Jones took the SD card and locked herself away. Sarah and Mike waited in the hall. Each tick of the clock made Sarah more tense. Finally, Dr. Jones came out. Detective Sergeant, look at this. She held a tablet playing a grainy video. On it was a figure in a dark coat and mask, carrying a backpack. The figure pressed a small box into the lab side door. The figure's shoes were black with red stripes. Sarah's breath caught. She remembered the torn scarf in her apartment. Same stripes. She froze. That's our bomber, she whispered. Mike leaned closer. And look, Dr. Jones said, the figure checks an ID badge before planting the box. Sarah's eyes widened. They can get into the lab with an ID. She swallowed. That must be one of us. Sarah's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen. A text from an unknown number. Time's up. She stared at the words. Her heart pounded. What does that mean? Mike asked. Sarah felt a chill. New bomb, she said. And it is ticking. She looked at the video. The figure's watch had a timer icon. It read 4 minutes and 30 seconds. 4 minutes 30 seconds until another blast. Sarah grabbed her radio. All units, find that man in a dark coat. He has a red striped backpack. He's the bomber. She and Mike ran down the hall. The timer ticked in her mind. 00:04:00. 00:03:30. The clock in the hall began to ring with each second. Sarah's boots pounded on the floor as she chased the threat. In the distance, she heard a low hum, like the countdown of a bomb. Then the lights flickered. She skidded to a stop. The hall was empty. The timer on her phone read 2 minutes and 17 seconds. Sarah glanced at Mike, eyes wide. He's here, she whispered. A door at the end of the hall slammed shut. The lights went out. Silence. Then a faint click. The timer on her phone read 1 minute and 5 seconds. Sarah's heart froze. The world spun. She reached for the door handle, and before she could turn it, the hall erupted in a deafening roar. A thunderous roar rocked the hallway. Sarah felt the blast like a giant's fist striking her chest. The walls shook, and tiles fell from the ceiling. Dust and smoke filled the air like a thick cloud. Sarah's ears rang so loud she thought she might never hear again. She stumbled, her boots scraping on broken glass. Sparks flew from the walls as wires sparked and crackled. The lights flickered wildly before dying, leaving the hall in pitch black. Mike's strong hand grabbed her arm. "Stay with me, Sarah," he yelled over the chaos. They fell to the floor as another smaller blast burst behind them, sending a wave of heat across their faces. Sarah coughed, choking on dust. Her heart pounded so hard she feared it would leap out of her chest. She pressed her back against the wall and pulled Mike down with her. Somewhere in the darkness, alarms wailed. Sirens grew louder outside. What had just happened? Who would do this to their own police station, and why? When the dust settled, Sarah's world was a gray haze. She blinked through the smoke and saw Mike's outline beside her. His uniform was torn, and his arm had a gash, but he gave her a quick, brave smile. "Let's move," he whispered. They crawled toward where they thought the exit was. Every breath burned their lungs. Sarah's hands trembled as she touched the cold wall for guidance. Finally, she felt the cool metal of an emergency exit door. She yanked it open and stumbled out into the fresh night air. The sky was clear, but the moon hid behind clouds. Firefighters were already dousing the smoking walls. Officers and paramedics swarmed the scene, helping the wounded and guiding bystanders away. Sarah and Mike leaned against the side of a patrol car, coughing. Sarah looked at Mike's arm. Blood stained his sleeve. "I'm okay," he said, wincing. "Are you?" Sarah touched her temple. It throbbed, but she nodded. "We have to find out who did this." She swallowed hard, tasting grit on her tongue. The fire in her gut turned cold with fury and fear. She forced herself upright. She would not rest until the bomber was caught. By dawn, Sarah sat in a small exam room at Central City Hospital. A nurse wrapped fresh bandages on her arm and wiped dirt from her uniform. Sarah shivered under a thin blanket. The nurse's gentle voice told her she had a mild concussion and a few bruises. "You're lucky," the nurse said. "Most people don't walk out of a blast like this." Sarah forced a small smile. "I have work to do," she whispered. Mike sat in the corner, head in his hands. When the nurse left, he looked up. "Chief Lawson is calling a meeting in an hour," he said softly. "He wants every clue on my desk by then." Sarah nodded, feeling the weight of the world settle on her shoulders. She glanced at the small desk calendar on the wall. It showed May 20th, 2025. The days since the first explosion had marched by in a blur. Each new blast pushed her closer to the edge of fear. Yet she refused to stop. She would chase every lead, no matter how small, until she uncovered the truth. An hour later, Sarah entered the chief's conference room. The windows were covered with heavy curtains, and the air was tense. Chief Lawson stood at the head of the long table. Mike and Dr. Jones sat on either side, clutching folders of evidence. The chief's face was grim. "Detective Clark," he began, "this attack was planned. The bomber knew the building's weak points. They used at least 2 timers. They had inside knowledge." He looked at Sarah. "Who could know this station so well?" Sarah took a deep breath. "Someone on the inside," she said. "Or someone who studied our blueprints." She opened her tablet and showed the chief a diagram of the blown wall. "The bomber put fuses here and here," she said, pointing. "Then they triggered this main blast down the hall." She tapped the screen. "The timer phone we found was set 2 hours before. That gives us a window." Dr. Jones leaned forward. "And the shoes in the video match the same black sneakers with red stripes. We saw them in the first lab blast footage." Mike added, "We traced the stripe pattern to a single brand used only by security staff at City Hall and the museum." The chief's eyes narrowed. "Security," he repeated. "So we look at every person who has security access to our key sites." He tapped his fingers on the table. "Find me everyone with that stripe pattern badge and those shoes. I want names." Sarah left the room and headed to the records office with Mike. They sorted through lists of security badges and shoe logs. The city required security guards to log their shoe brands for safety reasons. They pulled up a list of 10 names. Sarah read each one: Captain Davis, Officer Lee, Ms. Carter, Mr. Grant. Her finger stopped at one name: Jason Pratt, the security coordinator at Central City Hall. Sarah's stomach clenched. He had badge access to the precinct, the museum, and the lab. And he was trusted. Her mind raced back to the photo of the dark figure. Could it be him? She pointed his name to Mike. "Check his schedule," she said. "And pull every CCTV clip from City Hall, the precinct, the museum, and the lab. I want to see him in those spots at key times." Mike nodded and began typing. They spent the next 2 hours watching grainy camera footage. They saw Pratt checking in at the back entrance of City Hall at midnight on the night of the lab blast. He wore a dark coat, hoodie pulled up. His shoes glinted with red stripes under the porch light. Then they saw him again at 1:15 a.m. near the lab. They saw the bomber planting the device. The figure's build and height matched Pratt. Sarah's heart pounded. She paused the video on the figure's face. The mask fell back briefly, revealing Pratt's jawline and a small scar on his cheek. Sarah's breath caught. She rewound and watched again. It was him. She showed the clip to Mike. He nodded grimly. "We have our man." Sarah and Mike drove to City Hall in a patrol car. The morning sun was bright, but they felt the chill of dread. They parked in the underground garage and took the elevator to the security office. The door was unlocked. Inside, Pratt sat at a desk, tapping a tablet. He looked up, surprised. "Detective Clark," he said, standing. "I didn't expect to see you." Sarah held up her badge. "Jason Pratt, You're under arrest for planting bombs at Central City Police Precinct and the new lab. Pratt's face turned pale. He rose slowly, hands in the air. Detective, wait. Sarah cut him off. Place your hands behind your back. 2 officers stepped forward and cuffed him. Pratt did not resist. His eyes flicked to Sarah, full of fear. You don't understand, he whispered. I was just doing my job. Sarah's voice was cold. Your job was to protect us, not kill us. She led him out of the office. The doors swung shut behind them. Back at the precinct, Sarah sat in an interview room. Pratt sat across the table, head down. He wore an orange jail jumpsuit. Sarah slid a folder in front of him. We have video of you planting those bombs, she said. So why? Pratt lifted his head, eyes red. You wouldn't listen, he said. You never listened. Sarah frowned. Listen to what? Pratt's voice broke. The truth about Project Shadow. He pointed at the folder. You called it a plan to catch the shadow thief. But it was more. Sarah's heart sank. What do you mean? Pratt's eyes filled with tears. I was following orders from above. They said the art was ours. That we had to protect it, even if it meant framing you. He swallowed. They wanted to scare off buyers so the city could buy for cheap. The explosion at the lab was to destroy any proof. Sarah stared at him, stunned. Who gave the orders? Pratt shook his head. I don't know names. They hid behind code names. They used the Watcher account. They threatened me. He looked down. They threatened my family. Sarah pressed her lips together. She felt a cold knot in her stomach. The conspiracy was deeper than she thought. Someone high up in the city was using fear to steal art. And they would kill to keep it. Sarah stood and walked to the one-way mirror. She stared at Pratt's reflection, then at her own. She thought of all the people she trusted. Some were guilty, some were still free. She knew she had to find those hidden leaders before more bombs went off. She turned back to Pratt. You'll help us, she said. You'll tell us everything. Pratt nodded, defeated. I'll tell you, he said. But you have to protect my family. Sarah's mind raced. She would need to move fast. She looked at her watch. It was almost noon. She had hours before the next key meeting about stolen art. She grabbed her coat and badge. Let's go, she said to Mike, who had been waiting outside the door. He fell in step beside her, face set. As they left the interrogation room, Sarah's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. A text from an unknown number. You're close. Too close. Sarah's blood ran cold. She looked at Mike. They know we have Pratt, she said. And they're coming for us. Outside, the precinct doors opened onto a busy street. Sarah squared her shoulders and pushed through the crowd. Behind her, the door clicked shut. Sirens wailed in the distance. She knew the chase was far from over, and that her next step could be her last. A deafening roar shook the quiet street. Flames burst from the family home of Jason Pratt, turning the night sky bright orange. Sarah Clark's heart pounded so hard she thought it would burst from her chest. She sprinted toward the burning house, sirens wailing behind her. Through the thick smoke, she saw Mrs. Pratt stumble out the door, her nightgown torn and her face streaked with soot. Mr. Pratt crawled out behind her, his arm bleeding badly. They both cried out in fear. Sarah grabbed Mrs. Pratt's hand and pulled her back from the flames. With her free arm, she scooped up Mr. Pratt and carried him away. The heat was so intense it singed her hair and made her eyes water. Behind her, the house collapsed with a final, thunderous boom. Debris rained down. Sarah pressed herself to the ground and covered the Pratts with her body, shielding them from falling wood. Her uniform was hot and sticky, but she did not let go. When the fire truck streams finally reached the blaze, Sarah stood, her face streaked with ash, and helped guide the paramedics to Jason's parents. Flames still clawed at the roof. Sarah's breath came in short, sharp gasps. She knew this attack was no accident. It was a warning, and someone had to pay. Earlier that morning, the sun rose soft and gentle. Birds sang outside the window of the precinct's break room. Sarah sat at a small table, her uniform neat despite the late hour. Mike Roberts poured 2 mugs of coffee and handed one to her. You look tired, he said, worry in his voice. Sarah took a long sip. The coffee was warm and strong. She wrapped her hands around the mug. I did not sleep well, she admitted. I keep thinking about what Pratt said. About who gave the orders. Mike sat across from her, his face serious. He mentioned code names, Sarah said. He did not know the real names, only labels like Phoenix and Curator. Mike frowned. We need to decode those. They could point to the real mastermind. Sarah nodded. Yes. And I want to check the city council records and the mayor's office logs. Maybe the code names appear there. Mike took a deep breath. If someone high up is involved, we'll need backup from the FBI. Sarah's eyes hardened. I'll make the call. She reached for her radio. Dispatch, this is Detective Clark. Send FBI liaison to Central City PD ASAP. We have a case that may involve city officials. After a moment, dispatch replied that the liaison would arrive within the hour. Sarah set down the radio and rubbed her forehead. She looked at Mike. Let's start with Phoenix. That sounds like a new project name. Maybe a building or plan. Mike pulled up a map on his laptop. Phoenix is the name of the new City Development Committee, he said. They plan to rebuild the old Port District. Sarah's eyes narrowed. That's where the stolen art was supposed to go next. She tapped the table. Someone used Project Shadow to steal the art, and now they want to destroy evidence so they can smuggle it through Phoenix. Mike nodded. We should talk to Counselor Emily Reed. She's head of Phoenix. Sarah stood. Let's go. They gathered their things and headed out. They drove to City Hall in Mike's cruiser. The streets were quiet in the early morning. Sarah watched buildings pass by, her mind racing. She thought of Jason Pratt's frightened face. His family should be safe now, in the hospital under guard. But the fire at their home showed the conspirators would hurt anyone. Sarah gripped the steering wheel tighter. She would not let them win. At City Hall, security let them in quickly once Sarah showed her badge. They walked down a long corridor, past offices and meeting rooms. Sarah's boots clicked on the marble floor. She felt eyes watching her as she passed. She did not trust anyone. The flicker of her own reflection in polished windows reminded her that danger lurked everywhere. Finally, they reached Counselor Reed's office. The nameplate glinted on the door. Sarah knocked once and entered. Reed sat behind a large wooden desk, looking calm in a bright blue suit. She smiled politely. Detective Clark, Sergeant Roberts, what can I do for you? Sarah returned the smile, though her eyes were serious. Counselor Reed, we have questions about the Phoenix project. Reed's smile faded. Of course. But first, how are Jason Pratt's parents? Sarah paused. They're stable, she said. The fire was set by the same people who bombed our precinct and the lab. Reed's face drained of color. That's terrible. Reed stood and motioned to chairs. Please, sit. Sarah and Mike sat across from her. Reed sighed. I have nothing to do with those attacks. Sarah nodded. We know that. But someone used the Phoenix Committee name to move stolen art. And code names from Project Shadow appear in our files. Do you know anyone using those code names? Reed frowned. I've seen Phoenix in emails between me and the mayor's aide, Thomas Keller. Sarah glanced at Mike. Keller's name had come up before. Show us those emails, Sarah said. Reed tapped a button on her desk and an assistant brought a tablet. Reed swiped through the messages. Here, she said, pointing. Mayor Barnes asked me to check on port rebuild budgets, and I replied with Phoenix details. Sarah zoomed in. One email subject line read, Phoenix/Shadow Logistics. Mike raised an eyebrow. Sarah looked at Reed. That subject is odd, she said. Phoenix and Shadow together. Reed's face went pale. I don't understand. Sarah saved the email to her tablet. We will need a full copy of all communications labeled Phoenix and Shadow, and any meeting notes. Reed nodded, trembling. I will send them right away. Sarah stood. Thank you, Counselor. She and Mike left the office. In the hallway, Sarah felt a wave of dread. Someone had tried to kill Jason's parents. Someone had bombed the station and the lab. Now she was closing in on City Hall. The conspirators would not let her succeed. Her phone buzzed. She looked at the screen. A text from the unknown number, "Stop or they die." She swallowed hard. "Mike," she said, voice low. "They're threatening more lives." Mike's jaw clenched. "We move faster." Sarah nodded. "Let's go back to the station and review the emails." Back at Central City PD, the conference room was empty. Sarah laid out the email files, the map of Phoenix, and the code names. Mike joined her with city payroll records. "I matched Keller's pay to one mysterious bonus labeled Phoenix Shadow Fee." He tapped the printout. "He got a large payment last month." Sarah's eyes widened. That could be payment for moving art. She added the info to the table. "Now, who reports to Keller?" Mike scrolled his tablet. 2 names, Linda Torres in the port office and Mark Jenkins in procurement. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment. "We need to talk to both." She picked up her badge. "I'll interview Torres. You take Jenkins." Mike nodded. They split up. Sarah walked to the port office downtown. The building was old, with peeling paint. Inside, she found Linda Torres at her desk, typing. Torres looked up in surprise. "Detective Clark, what brings you here?" Sarah flashed her badge. "I have questions about Phoenix and Project Shadow." Torres's hands shook. "I don't know what you mean." "Sarah, Saturday emails show you discussed Phoenix and Shadow logistics with Thomas Keller." "Explain." Torres swallowed. "Keller told me to prepare shipping logs for art pieces. He said it was part of a city program to showcase art overseas." Sarah leaned forward. "And Shadow?" Torres's eyes darted. "He said Shadow was the code name for the art shipments." "He said it sounded cool." Sarah frowned. "You never wondered why?" Torres shook her head. "He had a folder full of documents. I just typed the logs. I didn't look inside." Sarah stood. "We'll need those documents." Torres nodded. "They're on my computer." She led Sarah to her desktop. Sarah copied files to a secure drive. "Thank you," she said. "You're helping us stop more violence." Torres looked relieved. I hope so." Meanwhile, Mike reached the procurement office and found Mark Jenkins shuffling papers. Jenkins gulped when he saw Mike's badge. "Sergeant Roberts, I wasn't expecting." Mike held up a hand. "Where did you get this invoice for Phoenix Shadow Fee?" Jenkins's face flushed. "That was a mistake." Mike picked up the invoice. "You billed the city for art handling. It's a lot of money. It went into Keller's account." Jenkins looked down. "I just followed orders." Mike leaned closer. "From whom?" Jenkins closed his eyes. "It was from a burner email, watcher@securemail.com." Mike's eyes narrowed. "The same Watcher account?" Jenkins nodded. "Yes." "Then I got a text. Make it quick." Mike wrote in his notebook. "We have your statement. Thank you." He left Jenkins in shocked silence. Sarah and Mike returned to the station and met in the conference room. The table was covered with new files, port shipping logs, procurement invoices, council emails. Sarah laid out the port shipping logs. "These show art crates going to a private warehouse in the Phoenix district," she said. Mike added the invoices. "And the payments match those shipping dates." Sarah's finger traced a date, May 10th. The last shipment left 5 days ago. She looked at Mike. "Where is that warehouse?" Mike tapped the map. "It's here, behind the old factory." Sarah's eyes lit with determination. "We're going there now." She grabbed her coat. Mike followed. "We'll need backup." Sarah locked her radio. "Dispatch, send uniform units to the Phoenix warehouse at 420 Industrial Road." She ended the call. "Let's move." They piled into a cruiser and raced through the city. The blocks flew by in a blur of brick walls and chain-link fences. Sarah gripped the door handle as they turned onto Industrial Road. The warehouse loomed ahead, dark and silent. She could almost taste the dust. The cruiser screeched to a stop. Sarah and Mike jumped out, badges out, guns drawn. They crept toward the locked door. Sarah pressed her ear to the metal and heard voices inside, muffled. She signaled to Mike. On 3. They kicked the door open. Inside, crates labeled Art Exhibit were stacked high. A single lamp cast long shadows. In the center of the room, Thomas Keller stood behind a crate, phone in hand. Counselor Reed stood next to him, face pale. Both looked shocked. Sarah's eyes widened. Drop the phone, she said. Hands where we can see them. Keller lifted his hands. Reed's eyes filled with tears. It's not what you think, Reed said. Sarah's jaw tightened. You've stolen art, threatened lives, and set fires. It is exactly what it looks like. She stepped forward. You are under arrest. Keller and Reed's faces crumpled. Officers flooded in behind Sarah and Mike, handcuffing them both. As they led Keller and Reed out, Sarah felt a wave of relief and exhaustion. She thought of Jason Pratt, his sacrifice, and his brave warning. She thought of the Pratt parents safe but scarred. The stolen art was recovered, and the city officials were caught. She imagined the quiet days ahead. But her phone buzzed. She pulled it out. A text from the unknown number. Congratulations. Now it ends. Before she could read more, the lights in the warehouse flickered. A low hum filled the air. Sarah's heart hammered. She looked at the stacked crates. One of them had a small red timer on it, counting down, 45 seconds. Her breath froze. She reached for her radio. Evacuate the warehouse now, she screamed. The timer ticked lower, 00:00:30. 00:00:20. Sarah's legs felt like lead. She looked at Mike. We have to get out, she cried. Officers and prisoners alike scattered. Sarah dove toward the door as the timer hit 10 seconds. And then, the world shook again. A bright flash filled the warehouse. Wood splintered and metal bent under the force of the blast. Sarah and Mike tumbled backward, thrown off their feet. Dust and smoke roared in their ears like a giant's breath. Sarah's heart pounded so hard she could not hear anything else. She saw crates fly apart, papers burst into flames, and the ceiling beam crashed to the floor. A deafening roar rolled through the room, then silence, heavy and thick. When the dust settled, Sarah lay on her back. Her uniform was torn and stained. She coughed as ash filled her lungs. Mike crawled over, his face smeared with dirt. Are you hurt? He asked, voice shaking. Sarah tried to sit up. Her head spun like she had been spun in circles. She touched her temple, warm and sticky with blood. She pressed a hand to Mike's shoulder. I'm here, she whispered. Mike nodded and helped her stand. Together, they moved toward the door, each step slow and careful. The warehouse was still smoldering. Flames licked at the broken crates. Officers and firefighters poured in, shining lights through the haze. Someone shouted, "Clear the area," and people backed away. Sarah and Mike made their way outside. The cool night air hit them like a wave. Neighbors had gathered at the curb, faces pale in the flashing red lights of fire trucks. Sarah spotted Jason Pratt's parents being helped into an ambulance. They were safe, but shaken. Mrs. Pratt held her husband's hand so tight the knuckles shone white. Sarah's chest ached for them. She knelt by the ambulance. They're okay, she told Mike. He let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. Sarah stood and looked at the ruin. The stolen art crates lay open, empty, their contents gone again. They took the art back, she said. Someone wants it more than life itself. By morning, Sarah sat in the chief's office. A new sunbeam warmed the desk. Mike entered with fresh coffee. He set a cup in front of her. You need this, he said gently. Sarah wrapped both hands around the mug. The steam fogged her glasses. She took a slow sip, letting the warmth spread through her body. Her head still ached, but she felt a spark of hope. They had saved Pratt's parents. They had arrested Keller and Reed. Now they had one final clue: the art was gone. And the mastermind was still free. Chief Lawson looked up from a map on his desk. Detective, he said, the art crates are missing from the warehouse. They vanished in the blast. Sarah nodded. Yes, sir. I think the explosion was cover to take them. She pulled out her notebook. We need to find where the crate went next. Mike leaned in. I checked GPS logs from the stolen tracking chips. They pinged near the Phoenix district. The chief frowned. Then that is our next stop. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment. She thought of the empty crates and the terrified Pratts. Let's get the FBI liaison, she said. Within the hour, FBI agent Sofia Martinez arrived. She was tall and calm, with a sharp look in her eye. She shook Sarah and Mike's hands. I'm here to help, she said. Sarah felt relief flow through her. They led Agent Martinez to the precinct conference room. On the table lay a map of the Phoenix district, pointing out roads, buildings, and the old port. GPS pings showed the art crate moving on a flatbed truck. It passed through deserted streets and stopped at an abandoned pier warehouse. Sarah tapped the map. Here, she said. It stayed for 50 minutes on Wednesday. Martinez studied the map. Then where? She asked. Mike pointed. Then the pings went dark. Sarah added, and reappeared at the city docks. The three looked at each other. The docks were busy today. A cargo ship was leaving at sunset. The stolen art could be on that ship now. As afternoon light streamed through the station windows, Sarah, Mike, and Agent Martinez prepared to leave. They packed gear, radios, flashlights, and gloves. Sarah checked her badge one more time. It felt heavy, carrying so much of the city's hope. Mike loaded a shotgun into the cruiser's rack. Martinez placed a rifle by her side. They drove together through the city. Each block they passed felt full of hidden eyes. Sarah thought of the unknown caller who kept menacing her. You're close. Too close. She wondered who was behind that voice. She gripped the steering wheel tighter. The sun dipped low as they arrived at the city docks. Giant cranes towered like metal giants. Shipping containers stacked high made the yard feel like a canyon. A small patrol boat bobbed at the pier edge. Sarah stepped out and breathed the salty air. The cry of gulls echoed. Martinez scanned the containers. The truck should be around here, she said. Mike checked a handheld device. Pings last came from container G17. They moved down the dock. Forklifts hummed in the distance. Workers paused to stare at the armed officers, then hurried away. Sarah's heart raced. She remembered the videos of her being framed. She did not want to be fooled again. They reached container G17. The paint was scratched and dusty. Martinez signaled for a K-9 unit. A police dog sniffed the metal door, then sat and barked twice. Sarah and Mike exchanged glances. Martinez nodded. Go. Sarah put her hand on the latch. She took a deep breath, then yanked it open. Inside, the container was dark. A single hanging light bulb flickered. Sarah stepped in, torch in hand. Mike covered her from the rear. Martinez swept the container with her rifle. They saw wooden crates inside, each marked Museum Exhibit. Sarah's pulse quickened. She approached the nearest crate. She pried open a side panel. Inside lay a painting wrapped in bubble wrap, the famous Sunrise over Central, the one stolen from the art gallery weeks ago. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. We found it, she whispered. They moved swiftly, opening all the crates and inspecting the art. All paintings were here, the small hidden painting from the warehouse, the sculpture pieces, the priceless artifacts. Martinez called in additional units to secure the scene. Fireboats and police cruisers surrounded the pier. The stolen art was safe again. Sarah felt a wave of relief. She thought of the city's children, who would see these treasures on display once more. She smiled, despite her throbbing head. Later that evening, back at the precinct, Sarah sat alone in her office. The lights were dim. She stared at a framed print of the recovered Sunrise over Central. On her desk lay the photo of the shadowy figure standing behind her, taken weeks ago. She had never identified that person. She traced the outline of the face with her finger. It was still a blur. She set it aside and opened an envelope. Inside was a single note. The end is near. Her breath caught. She folded the note and placed it next to the photo. The city's lights twinkled through her window as dusk settled. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. She looked up. Chief Lawson and Agent Martinez entered. Lawson's face was grave. Martinez held a file. Detective Clark, the chief said, Thanks to your hard work and the FBI's help, we recovered the stolen art and arrested the ring of corrupt officials. He nodded at Martinez. Agent Martinez will lead the federal investigation. Martinez spoke. Sarah, your name is cleared. You have our full support. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. She nodded. Thank you, she said softly. Martinez placed a hand on her shoulder. Good work. As the chief and Martinez left, Mike poked his head in. Ready to go home? He asked. Sarah rose and closed her laptop. She rubbed her temples. Yes, she said. I need sleep. They walked down the hall together. The precinct was quiet now, full of desks and lonely computers. Sarah felt a sense of peace for the first time in weeks. She thought of the chaos of the explosions, the betrayals, the fear. All of it was over. But as Sarah reached the front door, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out. A text from an unknown number. Tonight. The last move. Sarah's blood ran cold. She and Mike exchanged a glance. Outside, the city lights seemed less friendly. Sarah's hand shook as she locked the phone. She took a deep breath. Her uniform made her strong. Her badge stood for justice. But someone still watched, still threatened her. She looked up at the night sky. The stars were bright, but she knew they were hiding the last piece of the puzzle. And she was about to face one final challenge. What would happen next? The text on Sarah's phone glowed in the dark. Tonight. The last move. Her heart thundered so loud she thought everyone in the house could hear it. She stared at the screen, her hands shaking. Outside, rain tapped on the window like soft drums. Lightning flashed, lighting up her small living room for a moment. She swallowed hard. This was the final move by the person who had framed her, who had set bombs, who had tried to burn her home and hurt her friends. Now they had one last plan, and Sarah had to stop it tonight. She stood and put on her raincoat. She checked her badge in the mirror. It was bent and scratched from all the danger she had faced. She clipped it to her coat pocket. She filled a small bag with a flashlight, her radio, and her phone charger. She whispered, "No more hiding. No more fear." She took a deep breath, then stepped into the stormy night. Mike met her under the street lamp. His uniform was wet from the rain. He offered her an umbrella, but she shook her head. "I want to feel the rain," she said. He nodded. "We have good news," he said quietly. Agent Martinez found a new call log. The last unknown number that texted you is linked to Dr. Eva Jones. Sarah's breath caught. Dr. Jones, her friend who had saved her in the hospital and cleaned the fingerprints from the memory card, was the watcher. She had betrayed Sarah all along. Sarah stared at the dark street. "She's the mastermind," she said. "She used Pratt, Keller, Reed, and even Jason's parents." Mike's face was grim. "She has a key to the museum tonight. There's a gala there. She plans to blow up the main hall." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "Then that is where we go." They drove in Mike's cruiser through the empty streets. The rain slicked the roads and made the city lights blur. Sarah gripped the dashboard. Each red light they passed, she thought, time is running out. Finally, they reached Central City Museum. The big glass doors reflected a flood of colored lights from inside. Guards, guests in fancy clothes, music drifting out into the night. Sarah and Mike parked across the street. They ducked under the awning and slipped inside, badges out. Inside, the marble floor gleamed. A string quartet played softly. Guests in bright dresses and shiny suits laughed and clinked glasses. On the far side of the room, Dr. Eva Jones stood by the grand staircase. She wore a silver gown and held a champagne flute. Her hair was pinned up. Her eyes met Sarah's for a second. Sarah saw a flash of fear, then a cold smile. Dr. Jones raised her glass and mouthed, "Good luck." Sarah and Mike moved through the crowd. Mike stayed close behind her. The band played Spring Morning. The soft notes felt strange and safe in this dangerous place. Sarah's stomach twisted. She scanned the high balcony above the main hall. That was where the fuse wires ran. She had seen the blueprints. Somewhere up there was the bomb. She tapped her radio. "All units, secure the exits. Do not let anyone leave or enter." A crackling voice replied, "10 officers are in place, detective." Sarah tipped her head to Mike. We split up. I go upstairs. You find the timer. Mike nodded. Be careful. Sarah slipped through a side door marked, Staff Only. A guard nodded at her. She showed her badge and moved on. The hallway was dark. She felt the echo of her boots on the tile. She found the stairs and climbed quietly. At the top, the balcony stretched along the walls of the hall. Music floated up from below. She held the railing and looked down. Tables were set with art books and candles. Guests admired the paintings on the walls. Sarah felt a wave of sadness. They had risked so much to protect this art. She breathed in and held her flashlight. She paused at a metal grate in the floor. She remembered from the blueprints, the wiring ran through here. She knelt and pried up the grate. Beneath was a tangle of wires. One set of wires was bright red. She touched them with gloved fingers. Her radio crackled. Detective Clark, we found the timer phone. It's planted near the main statue. Sarah pressed a fingertip to the wall. Understood. She closed the grate and moved down the balcony to where a marble statue of the city's founder stood. She shone her light on its base. There, taped under a panel, was a phone with a blinking screen. The timer read 2 minutes and 15 seconds. Her chest tightened. She knelt and reached for it, but then footsteps echoed behind her. Detective Clark, a cold voice said. She froze. Dr. Jones stepped out of the shadows, holding a slim remote control. Her eyes were sad and determined. You always did like a dramatic moment, Dr. Jones said softly. Sarah's hand hovered over the phone. Why, Eva? She whispered. Why betray me? Dr. Jones held up the remote. This museum is too small for this city, she said. I wanted the art to be ours, not the people's. I had to scare everyone so they would sell it to me, at a low price, so I could build a private collection. She smiled sadly. You were too honest, Sarah. You stood in my way. Sarah swallowed. You used me, she said. You harmed lives, Pratt's family, my friends. Dr. Jones looked away. I'm sorry, she said. But this is the only way. Sarah clenched her fist. She looked at the phone's timer. 1 minute and 30 seconds. It ends now, Sarah said. She lunged for the phone. Dr. Jones raised the remote. Don't, she hissed. Sarah froze. She saw the red wires under the grate. She jumped toward the grate and kicked it open. Her flashlight beam found the red wires. She picked up wire cutters from her belt and sliced them one by one. Sparks flew. The timer on the phone splashed on the wall. 1 minute. Dr. Jones stared, panic flooding her face. Sarah snipped the last red wire. The timer froze at 45 seconds. Below, music screeched to silence as the band stopped. Guests looked up, confused. Sarah had to move fast. She scooped up the phone and ran down the stairs. She burst into the main hall. The guards were moving guests back from the statue. Mike stood beside them, guiding people to safety. Sarah handed the phone to Mike. It's safe, she said. She looked around. Dr. Jones was nowhere to be seen. Sarah's radio crackled. We found Dr. Jones in the back room. She has hostages. Sarah's stomach dropped. She turned to Mike. Go help them. I'll cover here. Mike nodded and ran toward the museum's offices. Sarah stayed in the hall, watching the guests huddle near the exit. She felt the weight of the moment. She had disarmed the bomb. But Dr. Jones still had power. She had enough time to do something terrible. Sarah slipped through another side door. A guard held the hallway for her. She showed her badge and slipped past. The back room door was ajar. Inside, security guard Tyler James held a gun to a museum clerk's head. Dr. Jones stood behind them, tears in her eyes. Tyler was shaking. Do it now, Dr. Jones whispered. Or she dies. Sarah raised her hands. Eva, stop this, she said softly. Dr. Jones spun around. Stay back, Sarah, she said. You ruined everything. Sarah's heart ached. She took a slow step forward. You don't have to end it like this. It's over. Dr. Jones's finger trembled on the trigger. Sarah saw Tyler's face. Fear, confusion. You can come quietly, Sarah said. We can help you. Dr. Jones's eyes flicked to the timer on the small phone in Tyler's pocket. It read 10 seconds. Sarah's pulse pounded. "No more games," she whispered. Tyler's hand shook. The gun wavered. Sarah held her breath. Dr. Jones looked at the counter, then at the gun, then at Sarah. The seconds ticked. 00:00:05. 00:00:04. Sarah tensed. Then Tyler's gun clattered as he dropped it. He pressed Dr. Jones aside and grabbed the phone. He held it aloft and pressed a button. The timer screen went black. Sarah exhaled so hard her shoulders shook. "It's done," Tyler said. He dropped the phone and turned to Dr. Jones. "You're coming with me." Sarah moved forward and took Dr. Jones's arm. Dr. Jones did not resist. Her face was pale. Sarah's voice was quiet. "It's over, Eva." Outside, sirens wailed. Guests hurried out of the museum into the rain. They clutched coats and umbrellas. Sarah led Dr. Jones down the steps. Mike met them at the bottom. He took Dr. Jones's arm and helped her into handcuffs. A line of officers stood ready. Sarah watched as Dr. Jones was led away, her silver gown soaking wet and her face streaked with tears. Sarah felt a heavy weight lift from her chest. She looked up at the grand hall. The statues, the paintings, and the marble stairs all stood safe under the museum lights. The art was safe. The city was safe. Sarah's radio crackled. "Detective Clark, great work. The FBI will take it from here." Agent Martinez's voice was warm. Sarah smiled. "Thank you," she said. She closed her eyes and breathed in the rain-scented air. It felt clean, as if the city had washed away all its fear. Sarah turned to Mike. "Let's go home," she said. He nodded. They walked through the crowd together. The guests clapped and cheered the police. A little girl in a red coat waved at Sarah. Sarah waved back and smiled. The girl's mother whispered, "Thank you, officers. You saved our city." Sarah's heart swelled. She nodded and kept walking. Just before they reached the cruiser, a bolt of lightning split the sky. Fireworks, planned for the gala, exploded overhead, bright reds and golds bursting against the dark clouds. The crowd gasped and stared in wonder. Water dripped from Sarah's hair and face. She looked up at the sky, then at Mike. "Perfect timing," she said, laughing softly. Mike laughed too. They stood under the fireworks and the rain, safe at last. And for the first time in weeks, Sarah Clark felt peace. The art was saved. The city was safe. The suspect, the investigator, had finally been caught. The storm cleared, and the sky glowed with the last streaks of lightning and fireworks alike. The end.